brief history of the Mildmay family, lords of the manor for almost 300 years over Moulsham and Chelmsford, or Bishop's Hall as it used to be known. This powerful family had many branches and controlled most of the land and development in Chelmsford, in a story that starts in 1506 with a Chelmsford market trader in the High Street and ends in 1878 with the rector of Chelmsford. The very first mention of the Mildmay family in Chelmsford was in 1506. Thomas Mildmay, a mercer or dealer of fine fabrics, illegally acquired a market stall in Chelmsford High Street. The market was held in the High Street in roughly the same place as today's farmers' markets. By 1524, he'd been very successful and was one of the richest men in town, and bought the house called Guy Harling's in the manor of Bishop's Hall. 3 of his sons followed him and became mercers, whilst 2 of them went into government service. His eldest son and heir, also called Thomas Mildmay, joined Henry VIII's Court of Augmentations as Henry sought to dissolve religious organisations across the country in the Reformation. Being one of Henry VIII's master auditors was a very profitable position. Auditors went around the country valuing religious premises before selling them off. Some people at the time noted that this much is certain, that a great number of men who were, when appointed to the office, were possessed only of inkhorn and pen, were, after 2 years, able to rank in wealth and estate with the highest in the land. Thomas did indeed grow very rich and was able to purchase many local lands and estates he had valued for the king, starting with the Moulsham Friary, then the manor of Moulsham, and then finally the manor of Bishop's Hall or Chelmsford. Having bought the manor of Moulsham, Thomas Mildmay, as lord of the manor, provided 6 almshouses in 1565 for poor people to live in. These were later rebuilt further back from the road in 1758 by his descendant William Mildmay, traffic being a problem even in those days. The inscription on the houses features the 3 rampant Mildmay lions from the Mildmay coat of arms. The medieval Dominican Friary in Moulsham, close to Moulsham Street and where Parkway now runs, was built around 1277. The Black Friars preached, cared for the sick and taught the poor. They also laid the pipes that brought clean water from the Burgess Well to the Friary and to the town centre. After Henry VIII closed the Friary in Moulsham in 1538, its lands and property were leased by Thomas Mildmay, Master Auditor to King Henry VIII, for 21 years at the cost of 32 shillings and sixpence. The manor of Moulsham was the property of the abbots of Westminster until 1539, when the king sold it to Thomas Mildmay for £622. At that time, Moulsham was an estate of over 1,300 acres, with over 200 tenancies, a watermill and valuable woodland. Around 1542, Thomas began to showcase his new status as Lord of the Manor by building a magnificent manor house which he called Moulsham Hall. This was sited in Moulsham, just down the way here, and somewhere near where Fortinbras Way now stands. Moulsham Drive led initially into it. Many of the roads around here do in fact have Mildmay connections. For example, Lady Lane was originally Lady Jane Mildmay's Lane, and so on. The original hall was a strong timber-framed rectangular building with an open quadrangle area in the middle. It had a moat filled with water around 3 sides, as well as a large garden. It was an impressive building, described as follows. In the said manor, there are many fair gardens and orchards, replenished with a great store of good, and some cases rare types of fruit and herbs. There belonged to it a dove house of brick, a fair fame of deer unparked, a great warren, a good fishing course, both in private pond and common river, a very good watermill, and a very great store of provisions. By 1671, Moulsham Hall was still the largest building in the area, as inspectors counted no less than 22 hearths or fireplaces for the hearth tax. In 1728, Thomas's descendant Benjamin Mildmay began to knock down parts of the house and to rebuild it over the next 20 years as a much larger and very grand building in Palladian style at a cost of £70,000, which was enormous at the time. The new manor house had stables, a brew house and dairy, with water supplied via elm pipes from the spring at the Burgess Well. It had statues of Apollo, Diana and Mercury made of lead mounted on the pediment, and on the east front there were the Mildmay lions guarding the gateway. There was a large walled garden, a garden walk, and flower beds with all manner of flowers planted in them. However, by 1771, the Mildmay family had completely run out of male heirs, and so for the first time under the terms of the original will, the entire estate passed to a woman, Dame Jane Mildmay. Her husband, Sir Henry Paulet St. John, took on the name Mildmay by royal warrant, as stipulated by the terms of the will, and the family name thereafter became St. John Mildmay. In order for Jane to keep her inheritance, the family were required to live at Moulsham Hall for 3 months of every year and to maintain it. As they already owned a large estate in Hampshire and had 15 children, including 11 sons, this requirement was something of an imposition. The beginning of the end for the Mildmays of Chelmsford came with the Napoleonic Wars. Chelmsford was heavily fortified against a French invasion by Napoleon. When Sir Henry and Dame Jane arrived at Moulsham Hall on the 12th of March 1803 for their annual residence, there was already an ongoing inquiry into billeted soldiers' forays in the neighbourhood. Sir Henry complained about the inconvenience and disturbance caused by the military presence so close to his house and came to an arrangement with the military to lease the house to the army. When the house was returned to the family a few years later, there was a further huge dispute over the state of Moulsham Hall, which by this time was in great disrepair and required a huge amount of money to be made habitable again. In fact, the family never lived in the house again, and the hall was completely knocked down in 1808, although parts of the garden and walls existed until World War II. Moulsham Hall's contents were sold on the 6th of March 1809 and over 5 subsequent days. Moulsham Hall Gardens covered 12 acres and was listed on the map of 1843 as the Great Wilderness. Dame Jane and Sir Henry's 7th son was Carew Anthony St. John Mildmay, born in 1800 and later to become Archdeacon of Essex and Rector of Chelmsford. He lived at the Rectory in Rectory Lane until his death in 1878. He was the last notable Mildmay to live in Chelmsford and is buried in the Rectory Lane cemetery. Bishop's Hall Manor was in the possession of the Bishops of London until 1545. Thomas Mildmay, Master Auditor, bought the manor of Bishop's Hall, later known as Chelmsford, from Queen Elizabeth in 1563 at a cost of £1,202. This included the manor house and watermill, the market in the town, the toll house to keep court in, and the Cross of Chelmsford. This united the manors of Moulsham and Chelmsford for the first time, although Thomas himself only lived another 3 years before dying in 1566, leaving his male tail will. Bishop's Hall Manor House was described as timber-built and tiled, a large old building which required considerable outlay to make it a comfortable residence. The hall remained in family hands until 1917, although they leased it out and never actually lived there. They sold it in 1917 and it was destroyed by a fire in 1929. The adjoining mill was constructed from brick and timber with an undershot wheel. By the end of the 1900s, it had an engine and worked 8 pairs of stone wheels. Today, only the water mill shaft, parts of the wheel sluice and the mill house, which we can see behind us, survive. The ancient mill was given up in 1920 before being demolished. By 1767, the County Gaol on this site, a timber-framed building next to the River Cann, was condemned as an ancient building and gone to decay, and frequently infected with the gaol distemper. A great debate arose around the siting of the replacement jail, either here in the old spot or much further north in the High Street near the courthouse. Sir William Mildmay was in favour of rebuilding the jail here on this old spot. This view was not universally held and led to a great argument between Sir William and another prominent townsman called Bamber Gascoigne. Sir William Mildmay died in 1771 without seeing the outcome. The jail was subsequently rebuilt here in the old spot. He also didn't live to see the outcome of another project to improve the London road through Moulsham. He left £200 annually in his will to help repair and replace the old wooden water pipes to help the well supply clean water to the town. After his death, his widow, Dame Anne Mildmay, became lady of both manors and patron of the parish. St John's Church in Moulsham was built on the site of a former hop garden owned by the Mildmay family. Lady Jane Mildmay of Moulsham Hall gave the land to enable the church to be built in 1837. An Act of Parliament in 1833 had finally allowed the Mildmay family to sell the lands previously entailed to them in Thomas Mildmay's original will, and on the 7th of May 1839, and for 3 subsequent days, there was a sale of 430 acres of property in 201 different lots. This enabled Chelmsford to enter a period of rapid expansion and significant new development, including the building of the railway and a new main road into the town called New London Road, Moulsham Street being the Old London Road. Dame Jane and Sir Henry's son Carew had become Rector of Chelmsford and Archdeacon of Essex, and lived in the Rectory building on Rectory Lane until his death in 1878. He was the last Mildmay of note to live in Chelmsford, although many other branches of the family exist all over the country. The Rectory Lane Cemetery was brought into use in February 1857 when the churchyard at the parish church of St Mary the Virgin closed. Some notable Chelmsford citizens have memorials or burials here, including Frederick Spalding in 1895, and the Reverend Carew Anthony St John Mildmay, 1878, Rector of Chelmsford.